Hi, I'm Sonia Vanjicki and I work collectively at Hunt and Hawk with this guy, Ryan Devlin. Now, let's just get clear about something because people often ask us, we're business partners, not life partners. Although what feels like 20 years working together, it can be kind of like a marriage. What I'm getting at is we do complete each other's sentences. I do boss him around sometimes and we definitely don't have sex. So before we get started, I also want to point out some of the differences between American idioms and Australian. Now, it's hardly surprising. You guys were settled by religious Puritans, whereas Australians were settled by convicts. So there's every chance I may cross the line, but hopefully not. Of course, the differences don't end there. We speak to American businesses a lot, and they can really lull you into a false sense of security. What I mean by that is we assume that you speak English, when in fact you speak American, which sounds almost exactly like English, but in fact it's a completely different language. For instance, you guys say trash can, we say rubbish bin. You call this a hood, we say bonnet. Baby's crying, you use a pacifier, we put a dummy in their mouth. You say cookie, we say biscuit, you say biscuit, we say scone. It's confusing, right? You say this is what a young Australian man looks like, whereas I say this is what a young Australian man looks like. Now, it's really interesting that the same thing can be perceived totally different. Your brand is the same. A brand image is the perception of the brand in the mind of the customer and the beliefs, values, and cultural influences they have had around them their whole lives. It can be perceived differently by different clients, which is why the formation of a consistent brand image is a huge task for many businesses. You want to know how to create a powerful brand that embeds itself in the hearts and the minds of your target audience. You're in luck. What I'd like to cover today is what a brand is and what a brand is not, how branding has changed, and how you can nail it. So if you called a rose by any other name, would it still smell as sweet? Sure, but people wouldn't be willing to buy bunches of them at jacked up prices every time the 14th of February rolls around. For the gentlemen in the audience, that's Valentine's Day. The red rose signifies romance because it is loaded with symbolic meaning that has been reinforced century after century. Now, branding works in similar ways. And firstly, let me clarify, a brand is not a logo. It means so much more than just having good content or the latest technology. You might have the greatest content in the world, but that's not going to help you establish a bond because you are missing emotion from the process. This is where we come in. Every piece of content, touch point, interaction, activity that you have needs to convey emotion. It needs to get people to feel something, to know something, to believe something every time they make contact with a piece of your content. Feelings bypass the rational side of the brain. Feelings most of the time trump logical thought. How often have you said, it just felt right to something that you didn't even know much about? Well, that's exactly what a brand should do. Create feelings. So that's what we want to do. We create brand identities, sales playbooks, marketing playbooks, websites, and content strategies. So every piece of consumable content that your business produces, whether that be a person, a brochure, or something intangible, will be anchored to a certain feeling to create that bond with your audience. Your prospects will have an emotional response to your brand before their conscious mind is even aware of it. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you'd be aware there's been significant changes in branding over the past decade or so, and digital disruption is largely to blame. So what's cool about this is the new way of branding is called neuromarketing because it involves the study of the brain combined with consumer behavior. So in saying that branding has changed in the past decade, it means our brains have undergone change as well. The way that your heart might beat a little faster when you see new likes on your social posts, these things are impacting how people respond to brands. Another part of this digital disruption is the ever-changing cultural landscape upon which we now build our brands. Consistency is still golden, but it's also a matter of keep up or die. We're living in the heyday of pop culture, and it's moving at a blink and you've missed it kind of pace. This is relevant to the implicit and collective understandings we create and learn as we move through the now constantly connected 24-hour news cycle, hashtagable, meme-sharing society. So keep your brand consistent, but invite and encourage participation. That's key. This is what keeps you relevant in 2019 and beyond. While consumers were once passive bystanders, having brand experience happening to them, now they are very much a part of that experience. Coca-Cola's Share a Coke with Insert Name campaign was pretty much all of this in a nutshell, or a 600ml bottle rather. It is personable, connectable, ever-changing and consistent. Despite your name instead of theirs appearing on the label, no one was wondering whether they'd accidentally picked up a Pepsi instead of a Coke. This campaign was made for consumer consumption, participation, and content like this, well, it's destined to be shared. So, how can you nail it? Well, now that you understand the importance of branding and the history behind it, what I really want to outline is how do we amplify your influence? How can you leverage your brand to intentionally get a direct response from your clients and prospects? What I'm going to suggest to you now is that our capacity to drive influence is determined by our understanding of human behavior. Because we're all collecting reams and reams of data, or as you American persons might say, data, and you should be collecting data, but very few of us convey it into understanding. Very few of us are using that data to create a sense of meaning. And the key to influence, the key to intentionally selling unintentionally, is understanding what's driving human behavior, what's driving your clients, what's driving your team, what's driving ourselves. So I'm going to share 4 observations with you today about just how we can increase our influence by understanding human behavior and the true nature of branding. So the first thing I want to suggest is that we all need to lose the delusion and plan for failure. Let me explain. If we're all honest, we're all a little bit delusional. Let's check this through. Have a look at the people sitting around you. Now what I want you to do is put your hand up if you believe you are below average competence compared to everyone else in the room. If you're below average, come on. Okay, Rob will fill me in, but I bet there weren't many honest people in the whole room. Here's how statistics work. 50% of the room should have their hands in the air right now. So that means we're all a little bit delusional. Let me share some frightening statistics with you. Of the entire globe, 50% of the global population was in the bottom half of the class. Now, obviously, I'm not saying this is geographically correct. I mean, what are the odds of the United States being in the top half and Australia being in the bottom? There we go. Much better, right? Now, let's forget. 50% of the population is below average competence. So let's look at the average. I'm sure you've all seen the bell curve before, because when we look at average, it's the same everywhere in the world, right? Usually sits somewhere between 60% and 70%, usually around 65. But here's what that means. This is what a bell curve really looks like before we standardize it. We have a few people at the top who are exceptional, a whole pile of people who are above average, and a whole pile of people who are around 50%. And then one person down the very end who is technically just a potato. Now, let's assume the bell curve at 65%. What that means is the average person, your average client, the average member of your team gets 1 in 3 decisions wrong. That's what 65% means. 1 in 3 decisions is made incorrectly. And that's assuming that all decisions are equally weighted. Did you pick up the kids from school is equal to, do you want fries with that? Gallup's Global Workforce Engagement Study found that 50% of our workforce is not engaged in the work that they're doing, and 20% is actively disengaged. The majority of our staff ranges between "I don't care about this job" to "I hate this job." And one of the reasons we fail is we don't factor that kind of failure into our systems and our processes. We need to assume that average doesn't sit exactly where we think it does, and we actually need to plan for failure. The principal reason we fail is we don't plan for failure. I was actually lucky enough to see Richard de Cripsey speak at a conference last year, and he famously landed an Airbus A380 with a giant, massive, gaping hole in the wings because the engine blew up. Now, he did it safely. He saved over 400 passengers, but surprisingly, he's very quick to give a lot of credit to the plane itself. Now, undoubtedly, Richard's a hero. He's also very modest, but he's partly right. For over 50 years, the aeronautical engineering industry has been designing planes that can stay up in the air with only 50% of their engines working. What that means is they can lose half of their thrust and still maintain enough altitude and speed to not fall out of the sky to get where they're going and land safely. So, how many of us are thinking about that way about business? I mean, what would happen if your business tomorrow, if 50% of your clients just disappeared, or if half your team didn't show up, or if 50% of your tech failed? For those of you who aren't cloud-based, let's just say 50% of your paperwork blew up in flames. Here's the thing though, failure is going to happen. Spoiler alert, it's going to happen. It's going to be epic, and even with technology, sometimes because of technology. So we need to factor in failure into design. We need to expect it so failure doesn't have to be so catastrophic. One of the ways we can do this is by working with human nature, not fighting against it. Which leads me to point 2, driving change by working with human nature. You know, growing up in Australia, you learn 2 really important things about swimming in the ocean. The first is always try and swim near the English or Japanese tourists, because without being racist, you might not be able to outswim a shark, but hey, you might just not have to. We're tough in Australia. The second is if you get caught in a rip, always swim with the current. Never try to swim against it, because you'll go nowhere. You get exhausted. Without rescue, you might even drown. We think it's exactly the same when it comes to working with human nature. You need to swim with the current of it, not try to fight it. If we try to fight it, we go nowhere, we get tired, we get jaded, we give up. Here's the thing. Human nature is not always as magnificent as we think it is. We walk around pretending we're all motivated and inspired all of the time. We're amazingly selfless, we're incredibly courageous and blindingly intelligent, but most of the days we're pretty average. In fact, there's no nice way for me to put this, but most of the days we're selfish, scared, and stupid. Now, I know you're probably thinking, wow, tell us what you really think, Sonia, but I actually think selfish, scared, and stupid is really amazing things to be. It's one of the reasons we're all here today, because our forebears were selfish, scared, and stupid enough to stay alive long enough to pass their genetic material. So being selfish meant that we always looked out for number 1, ours and our own. Being scared meant we looked to mitigate risk. We were acutely aware of our failures and we looked to compensate for them, right? And being stupid meant that we looked out for the easiest and simplest way to get something done. So why is this important? Our survival brain still drives most of our decisions unconsciously. In fact, it drives most of our decisions so much the American Journal of Applied Psychology did 3 separate experiments. In every case of those 3 experiments, they found that a human being reversing out of a parking lot takes longer to reverse out of the spot if another person is waiting for that spot. It's not your imagination, it's true. What's actually happening is our survival brain is unconsciously kicking in and defending its territory. Don't leave your spot, it's your spot, right? It's my spot, not theirs. Even though it goes against our primary goal of leaving the parking lot, getting home and watching The Voice, or whatever show you like, here's the thing we've learned. Design beats discipline and motivation every time. No one is motivated all of the time. No one is disciplined in all parts of their lives either. So Motivation and discipline are great, but they're actually short-term strategies. If we want to drive lasting change, we need to think about design rather than discipline and motivation. So let me give you an example. Every year, Ryan and I get together and we share our business and personal goals. Now, we fly a lot. We meet clients. Next week, we'll actually be in Singapore. A few weeks later, we'll be in Bali, then back to Perth and Sydney and Melbourne. And later on, we'll be in Philippines and USA. So we live also about an hour away from each other as well. We don't get to spend a lot of time. So at the beginning of 2017, my personal goal was to have more flexibility, to spend more time at home and enjoy the things I want to do. We got to the end of 2017 and realized we hadn't achieved that goal at all. So we sat down, we did the numbers, and what we found was we were driving around to meet each other every day for 1 hour, 1 hour in, 1 hour out. That was 2 hours every day, times 5 days a week, 10 hours a week, roughly one long work day every week. Multiply that by 52, factor in weekends, 2 whole months every year that we were driving around, not at gym, not at home, not doing something else productive that we wanted to be doing. Discipline won't solve that problem. Motivation can't solve that problem. It's a design failure. If we removed our need to go to an office every day, work from wherever we wanted, had a regular meeting rhythm that allowed us to cut just 30 minutes of that time, we instantly, without more motivation or more discipline, get an extra month every year. But we don't think about that in business so much. We don't design for solutions. We either beat up our team and try and drive discipline, or beat ourselves up and try and change our own behavior in order to get a result. And it makes a significant difference in the way we design for productivity. You know, when designing a brand, every wall is our brand. Our brand is defined by our most recent customer touchpoint. So we're working with a large telco at the moment, an internet services provider in Australia. Now, put your hand up if you've had it's reasonable to assume that everyone has had a poor customer service experience with a phone company, unfortunately. Something common we can all agree on, I'm sure. But when you rang the company and had that bad experience, did you walk away thinking, wow, that was an awful experience. I hope that person I spoke to was okay. I hope they didn't have a child that was sick at home, or I hope they didn't have a biff with their spouse. No, instead you walk away thinking, I hate that company. The entire organization, the entire brand is defined by its most recent client touchpoint. That's also our opportunity though. We recently had to buy some work furniture, so naturally I went to IKEA. Now, I hate IKEA. I almost hate Swedish people because of IKEA. You go in looking for a bookcase, they hand you a stack of wood and a hex key and they say, here, put that together yourself. What I like to do is get a $100 bill, rip it up, hand it to them and say, here, put that together yourself. Here's some instructions in Chinese, just to top it off. Anyway, I walked into IKEA and it was pissing down outside, raining, pouring. We walked into the store and there was this little A-frame sign, handwritten in chalk, that said, it's raining outside. We've cut the price of umbrellas in half. Now, all of a sudden, I liked IKEA and felt more disposed to spend more money in that store. Now, whenever I see an amazing example of customer service, I love to track down the manager of the store and find out just how they trained their team to make that happen. And I did just that. I tracked down the manager of this IKEA store and I asked him, how do you train your team? What is it that you did that made your team so thoughtful? And he said, no. It wasn't about how we trained our team. Every IKEA store on the planet has one of those signs. We just train our team how to wheel it out when it's raining. In other words, what they do is they do the thoughtfulness before the thoughtfulness is required. How do you design your teams and your systems and your processes and your interfaces in the way that your team talk to your prospects and clients? How do you design for success? With a bias towards success and a bias against failure, that's the opportunity we have. Do the thoughtfulness before the thoughtfulness is required. My question to you is, what in your sales and marketing playbook are your team going to be prepared with? Okay, moving on to the third point. The thing I want to cover is aligning your goals with their values. Because so often we spend all this time talking about our product or our services or our features or our benefits. We spend so much time talking about ourselves that we're not actually engaging in our clients properly, or our team for that matter. Here's the thing. The truth is, the sale is never in the product. The sale is always in the prospect. Align your goals with their values. Now, to give you an example, we were recently working with a large medico technology supplier. We said to this group of medico sales reps that we were training, "Can anyone here tell us what the doctors sell?" To which they responded, well-being, drugs, healing, education, expertise. But here's the thing, doctors are professional services. Doctors sell their time. If I go see my doctor, he says, "Sonia, you're a diabetic with high blood pressure," for the record, I'm not. But he writes me a prescription. I walk out the door, have a stroke, drop dead. I didn't get health. I didn't get well-being. The doctor got paid though. The selfish son of a, he got paid. Here's why that matters. Every single one of those medical sales reps are on the phone every day. And what's the one thing they ask doctors to give them for free? I hope you got it right. Time. We infringe on our clients' values all of the time because we don't understand them well enough. We're collecting data, but we're not translating that into understanding. We're not creating a bond with them. We're working with some optometrists as well, and we said to them, "Can anyone here tell us what business you guys are actually in?" And they said, "Oh, we're eye doctors, so we're all in medical services." And we said, "Oh, that's interesting. Where's the money coming from? Where do you make the margin? Do you make the money at the back of the room going blurry, less blurry, 5 years of college and to do that?" And they said, "No, the consults cover the costs, but we actually make all our real money selling frames." So we said, "That's interesting. So you're not medical services, you're all in retail fashion." And they looked at us like, 5 years at college. Gosh, these guys tell us how to sell us that we work at H&M. So we said, "What does your store look like? Does it look like a fashion boutique that's inviting and I want to go in and spend my time browsing and trying stuff on? Or does it look like a medical clinic that's intimidating and no one wants to go into unless they have to?" So what does your website look like? Are the frames listed out by face shape so I know what will make me look good? Or are they just categorized by brand? Where does your training budget go? Does your sales training budget go to yourself so you can learn how to do the blurry, not blurry thing a little bit more efficiently? Or do you spend it on the 19-year-old at the front updating her Facebook status when she's the sales department and the source of all your profit? They spend all their time, money, focus on all the wrong things because they don't understand the business that they're really in. They know their product. They know their service. They know their jobs. They know their role in the business, but that doesn't mean that they understand the business they're really in. We see this with accounting firms all across the world all the time. One of the things I do when I'm not working with my clients and Ryan at Hunt and Hawk, I sit as the director on the board of the Mental Awareness Foundation. It's a charity here in Australia. Now, they have a campaign to prevent and end suicide. And I got involved for two reasons. The first reason was a poster I saw in college that was simply very confronting. It read, 1 in 7 people die from suicide. Will it be your best friend, your brother, the person that cut you off on the highway today, or you? From that moment on, I made sure my friends never had to worry about having someone that they could talk to, no matter what time it was or how far apart we were. Every day I would simply ask a stranger how they were, and I sat and listened to them. And separately, I did all I could to learn techniques that would make me mentally stronger and in control of my emotions. I wanted to make sure I was the best version of myself, and I did this not because I care, but because they made mental health everyone's issue. They made mental health my issue. They aligned their goals with my values. So the second reason I got involved was this, bullying. In high school, I was bullied so much that the kids would ask me if I was going home to slit my wrists. And I see it every day through the work we do at the foundation. We have children abusing social media and bullying each other, not just in the playground, but across all these platforms that are available to them today. I'm involved in the Mental Awareness Foundation for selfish reasons, because it's about the world I want my children to inherit. They've aligned their goals with my values, and that's what we can all do as a brand, is align our goals with the values of our audience. It doesn't matter what you're creating, whether it's an online ad or an app or a website or experience face-to-face. If you can do that, then you can really engage your audience. I found this small space advert in a local newspaper as well. It has an image of a single rose, a medium bunch of roses, and a huge bouquet of roses, with a simple thought that just reads, "Just how sorry are you?" They clearly know what it is they're trying to sell to their customers. Another example, companies like Crocker, who invented the cake mix back in the 1950s, what most people don't realize is they were initially an incredible failure, and they failed because it was simply too easy to use their product. I know women are complicated creatures, but in the 1950s, housewives, they didn't feel like it was real cooking. So Betty Crocker reformulated the mix and changed just one thing. They changed it so women got to crack an egg into the mix and feel like they were part of the process. What's important is they realized that they weren't selling cakes. Instead, they were selling care, as making a cake is an act of care, and that was the critical ingredient. It's really important that we align our goals with their values. Another thing that's important here is the language. So often we change messaging used to talk about an issue to make things more meaningful and significant. We do this in the corporate world all the time. We use less human language and make it difficult for people to connect with what we're saying. I mean, we call our staff capital and staff. Why do we call them staff? They're your team. So user experience, another example, UX, I use it all the time unfortunately, but it goes against the whole point of having a user experience. And then there's the massive amount of jargon that we just use every single day, the kind of stuff that sounds like it should be delivered by a 1950s smiling air hostess. We need to optimize our collateral to facilitate the corporate journey and streamline our boarding process so that all our employees can live the corporate values, walk the corporate path, and embody the company ethos. That way, we'll have the bandwidth to leverage our supplier pipeline, create enough synergy so that going forward, we can ideate some blue sky thinking and incentivize our brand of evangelists with a holistic approach to a bespoke solution, all by COP, that's close of play. Because remember, we're all having such fun, aren't we? Now, my last point is creating stories that are worth sharing. As accountants, you are most in danger of being invisible over something like controversial. We're living in an age of internet and chatbots and Kickstarters. Shit is changing big time, okay? So what does it mean for companies, and more specifically, what does it mean for your brand? Well, up until about a decade ago, brands would be successful because they would be offering consumers a better product at a better price than what their competitors were offering. Seems pretty straightforward, right? So what's happening now is, after all we've been online for a couple of decades and become a lot more savvy, and if not a little bit more cynical. So what we want are actually exceptional customer experiences. We're in fact overwhelmed with the amount of options, and more than ever we are relying on our emotions to make these decisions for us. And what we are looking for more than anything is that connection. We want to be able to connect to a brand. So what does connection mean for brands in our online, always on your phone, never ask a stranger for directions type of world that we live in? Well, I'll tell you, it's about telling stories. Stories that are very original, but that evoke familiar feelings. It's about building communities where people are interacting with other people, not interacting with businesses or companies, but with other people through the brand experience. Perhaps just like you are now in the room with all your peers. So as I said, a brand is a feeling. It's something like your logo is just one small cog in the mechanics of the brand machine, and another part of that machine is the story. A good brand tells a story. So what type of stories am I talking about? Well, to keep things simple, there's actually three main types that this should fall into. One is an aspirational story. So you want to show your audience something they will aspire to. Paint the brighter picture. The second is a story of an innovation. Let's crush it. Let's go out there and conquer the day. Or the third thing is an inspirational story, where you dive a bit deeper, you make them feel inspired towards a greater purpose. In order to know which story to use, you need to know who your brand is targeting. Who's going to benefit the most from your content? Or rather, reverse engineer this. Who do I want to provide the most value to with my content? And that's what intent-based branding is. You find the exact type of content that's going to provide the most amount of value to your ideal prospect, and then present it to them in a way that's going to cause them to bond with you on an emotional and psychological level. So you're actually helping them and creating a bond. Once you've done that, I guarantee you, you show them adverts, funnels, webinars, all that fun stuff that pitches to them, but it won't break the bond. Ultimately, you'll be able to get your message across in a more meaningful way when you've already made that meaningful connection with your audience. That's exactly why we exist. You know, we started as Hunt and Hawk to help professionals like accountants create unique brand experiences. The idea is that they connect with the right people in meaningful and extraordinary ways. We truly believe every individual should be receiving services in extraordinary ways. And the way you do that is to create that connection and bond with them. I'll give you one last example. We use a program called Meet Leonard for Hunt and Hawk, but also as a small part of our clients for their marketing strategy. Now, Meet Leonard essentially sends out an automatic connection request to people you target on LinkedIn. From here, most people will accept the connection, but none will take it any further action. So they build their network with no further outcome. Whoop-de-doo, right? What we're doing with some of our clients is they get the LinkedIn connection, then we add a next step in the sales process. That then triggers a direct mail piece to be physically sent to them. I'm talking physical direct mail in the post. We crafted a beautiful and powerful sales letter packed with case studies, but what made it different is we attached $1 to the letter. Now, this has been tested with larger sums of money, but it actually made no difference to the conversion rate. The idea behind the money is we value their time and want to buy a moment of it. It goes down really well, as on average 60% of the people who receive the letter convert. Now, we have other clients who take this a step further again, and they've tested it by actually picking up the phone and calling people who have made a connection with them on LinkedIn. Who does that? I mean, imagine if you connected with someone. You already have an icebreaker because you accept their connection request. It's kind of genius, right? It's so important that you use these methods to create an identity more powerful than your brand. Ultimately, your marketing can generate the direct response you're after, or the equilibrium is going to simply drag you back. So what you need to do is create a connected online experience that creates stories that people can share on your behalf. It's about the capacity to build activity that connects with people. And none of this is sending a shotgun email out to a cold database, sorry Rob, or posting a blog, and it's like watching paint dry waiting for a lead to come in. I don't want to hear what your values are. I want you to show me how you live by them in your business. The best way to do that is to have a clear why and belief statements, have a structured sales marketing playbook that encompasses all of this, so your team know exactly what to do at every stage of the process, and then you back it up with an online strategy and presence that's worth sharing. I hope this has been valuable for you, and please reach out. I'd love to have a chat to you guys about your lives and your business. Take care.